The electronic billboard shimmered in all the colors of the rainbow, echoing with painful flashes somewhere inside Boalk's skull, as if someone had opened his head and was now picking at it with awkward, gaunt fingers. Boalk grimaced and turned down a narrow side alley between the storage building and an abandoned high-rise parking lot. The alley was littered with garbage, stinking of rot and urine, but from there, he could watch the vault doors without attracting attention. Boalk was most interested in back exit, through which the cleaners usually took out the waste and expired goods. Of course, the signage promised best contracts and unlimited shelf life at exclusive prices, but business was business. If someone ran out of contract and had no relatives or other legal representatives, then, well, business is business. Of course, most of the overdue goods were picked up by the suppliers of the Archon Council or some other higher authority, and there was not the slightest hope of intercepting even the smallest change from them. However, if something went spoiled, the owners of the cheap vaults would sell it to the garbage collectors, and there, Boalk might have a chance. Besides, there were rumors about such vaults that they could supposedly accidentally make a mistake and then sell the waste on the black market. Boalk had never dealt with this particular storage facility, but he had no choice. He owed Lousy Tim, his dealer, nearly 3,000, and he could only expect something if he paid back at least half of it. The measly 100 Boalk had at his disposal couldn't solve the problem. Tim would simply take it as a percentage and give Boalk a sound thrashing as a reminder. In the distance came the sickening squealing of a police siren. Boal instinctively pulled his head into his shoulders. The contents of his skull responded to the sharp sound with another attack of pain and tried to blend in with the ugly interior of the alley. Actually, he has no active warrants on him now, and he'd earned his 100 relatively honestly, helping old Johnson unload the van. The stuff was almost certainly stolen, but nobody talked about it out loud, and Johnson's pawn shop was practically as legal as it gets in the hood. But the cops could pick up Boalk for nothing, under the pretext of vagrancy, and keep him in a cell until morning, until the judge came, and he couldn't afford that. After a few more hours, he'll be hit with the real shakes. So the current headache would seem just a mildly unpleasant recuperation. This time, however, the police were obviously preoccupied with far more critical matters. A police skimmer swept past the alley, kicking up piles of dust, plastic scraps, and other debris. The siren immediately began to fade, lost in the distance behind the noise of the evening city and the sounds of the never-sleeping harbor nearby. Boalk breathed a sigh of relief and peeled himself away from the wall, keeping a close eye on the side exit of the vault. The truck skimmer pulled up at the back door. A plastic billboard bolted on the battered receiver body, once painted bright canary-colored, but now long since faded and covered with juicy rust stains like camouflage splotches, read, "Short-term storage, cleanup, decomposition, Mulio & Co. Scavengers." Boalk felt a long-forgotten, ugly feeling stirring deep inside him, but he suppressed it and tried to give himself a confident and independent look. Now was not the time for old grudges and settling scores. That was not what he had come for. The driver didn't come out of the skimmer. He had either arrived at the prearranged time or was about to call the console and summon the vault duty officer. Boalk took a deep breath, stepped out of the alley, and headed for the skimmer and the side entrance. He arrived just as the door opened, and a stocky man in his 50s, wearing stained uniform overalls, stepped out of the building. In his hand, he carried a large, weighty bag that small flea market vendors usually carry their junk in. The big man set the bag on the sidewalk, the metal in the bag jingled, and gave Boalk a hostile look. "What do you want, buddy?" The big man's tone was calm but not yet threatening. Boalk cheered up a little. "Excuse me, sir," he said, trying hard to keep his voice from shaking. "Would you mind selling me some of the waste? I can pay. I have the money, sir. Behind Balk's back, the skimmer door slammed. Trouble, Gustav? The big man made an indeterminate sound, either a hum or a grunt. There's a stub here, interested in some waste. Says he'll pay. He'll pay? That's good, you can never have too much money. Balk stood there, afraid to move. He knew that long, lazy voice. His feet felt as if they were frozen to the dusty sidewalk, while his thoughts were frantic. Run, run, run. But he knew it was pointless. Lousy Tim stepped out from behind Balk, bent over, unzipped the bag, and took out a cylindrical container the size of a 25-ounce thermos. Several other containers gleamed in the flickering light of the advertising sign in the bag's depths. How much are you willing to pay, boy? How much do you think a thing like this is worth? Balk gathered his courage and looked up. The big man in overalls was looking at Balk with a frank smirk. He obviously did not suspect Balk knew Tim, and the latter, in turn, had not given away his acquaintance. If such a company existed, one would have thought that Tim was really the driver of an unknown company called Mulio & Co. Tim looked at the container he held in his hand, then back at Boalk. Lousy Tim was completely hairless, on his head, his arms, anywhere. There was talk that it was either a genetic or the result of some old poisoning or radiation. Boalk didn't care about the reasons, but the look of piercing brown eyes without eyelashes frightened him to stomach cramps. What's it gonna be? How much money do you have? Boalk realized there was no way to keep silent. 100, sir. I have 100 credits. It's not stolen, I promise you, sir. The big man made a series of unintelligible grunts, and Boalk realized that was the sound of his laughter. 100? You're really in the money, dog. Wait a minute, I'll bring you a fresh one hot off the presses along with the contract. He suddenly grew serious and loomed over the shrinking Boalk. Get out of here, you animal, he growled. I don't want you here. Do you understand? If I smell your stench from afar, you'll be sorry. Got it. The big man's hand slipped into the pocket of his overalls. Do you understand what I've told you, you piece of shit? Boalk backed away, staring at the glass sphere with a clear liquid clutched in the big man's hairy fingers. Gustav, come on. No need to be so rough. Lousy Tim's voice sounded surprisingly calm, almost indifferent. Our friend is just... Let's say he underestimated the cost of what he wanted and slightly overestimated his financial possibilities. This material... He raised his hand with the container, holding it with one end facing Boalk. A blue spark flickered evenly in the middle of the end. Boalk was stunned. It was not a waste. A waste indicator was usually either not lit or glowed red, or, at best, orange, but blue. What is going on here in the name of the 10 gates? I see you understand, Tim said, looking straight into Boalk's eyes. You won't make enough money for this stuff in 3 lifetimes, but you don't have to worry about that. You should be concerned with other, more pressing matters. Old debts, for instance. Do you understand me? Boalk nodded, unable to utter a word, took a few steps backward, keeping his eyes on the big man and Tim, tripped over the rotten wooden crate, and almost fell over. The big man grunted again and hid the glass globe in his pocket. Boalk took one last look at the container in Lousy Tim's hand, then turned and darted out into the stinking darkness of the alley. The withdrawal was getting closer and closer, slowly chewing up the Boalk's well-being. The headache from the back of his head crept into his temples, starting a hellish dance of red-hot nails. The painful cramps began to stiffen the leg muscles more and more often, forcing Boalk to lose the steps and fall down on the pavement strewn with cigarette butts, syringes, and used condoms. The giant's hand grabbed the liver and shook it occasionally, making Boalk's breath catch and his eyes darken. But in a surprising and nightmarish way, he almost didn't notice it all, absorbed in one thought. Blue sparks. Not a waste due to late payments or disputed and canceled contracts. A full-price material, paid for, safe and clear. Lousy Tim was right. Boalk couldn't even imagine how much such a container could be worth on the black market, and it was a question if you can sell it there. Most ethereal waste dealers wouldn't risk such a thing. You could get a 10 or even 20 years of federal max for trading in waste and expired products, but it was the usual risk. And what would they give for the decomposition of the blue spark? Boalk suspected he didn't even want to know. It wasn't Lousy Tim's hint that it was time to repay his debt that scared Boalk the most. He would survive. It wouldn't be the first time. Tim won't kill him for $3,000. But as for that knowledge, Boalk accidentally learned something that no one should know. Why did they let him go in the first place? Maybe he should rat them out to the police, ask for witness protection and all that. The feds should get on board with this kind of thing, because if you can spin a network of blue spark dealers, you can build a whole career on it. Boalk grinned bitterly and shook his head, annoyed at his own stupidity. Who is he kidding? They won't even listen to him. Who was he? He's a lowlife and a low-down junkie. Besides, his testimony in court won't be worth a dime. He's not even human. No, even if they hear him out, he won't get any protection from the feds. They'll throw him back on the streets, and that's it. And as soon as word got out that he'd been ratting on Lousy Tim, his days, no, hours would be numbered. The cell phone rumbled in his pocket. Boalk pulled out a scratched device with a cracked screen. Hemoth, his cousin, was calling. Boalk was surprised. Hemoth was a municipal employee and was careful not to get too close to his errant cousin. "Hello, Hem," Boalk said, trying to keep his voice steady, though it was at this point that withdrawal decided to drive a particularly long and rusty screw into his skull. "It's been a long time." "Shut up and listen," Hemoth cut him off. "I know you have a problem with Dunball." It took Boalk a few moments to realize who his cousin was talking about. Lousy Tim's full name was Timon Dunball. "If you don't screw it up, you've got a chance to start with a clean slate. I don't know why I'm risking my neck by leaking this information to you. Anyway, listen up. Dunball's had it. In about..." There was a brief pause. Apparently, Hemoth looked at his watch. "In about 40 minutes, his lair will be raided." "A raid?" Boalk asked in bewilderment. "How does that help me? Dunball will be out in a month, and if he isn't, his buddies will nail me." "This isn't a police raid," Hemoth said. "Stop talking and listen. I don't have much time. Dunball's in big trouble. There's a lot more muscle involved than the cops, or even the feds. They're not going to arrest him. This is a liquidation raid." Blue sparks. Boalk barely stopped himself from saying it right into the phone. Some things are best never said out loud. "Everyone close to him is also on the list," Hemoth continued, "and the street scum don't know who owes Dunball how much, but he must have your receipts." Boalk understood. For Lousy Tim, small dealing was just a pastime, a hobby. He made so much money that a lousy 3,000 didn't matter. He was more interested in leashing junkies, occasionally using them to do his dirty work. The same fate was likely to befall Boalk, but things would be different if the receipts fell into a small-time street dealer's hands. For $3,000, those petty bastards will cut him to ribbons. "What can I do?" Boalk asked. There was really no time for idle chatter. After the action, the police will wait for 15 minutes before arriving. I don't know why so much. Probably to be able to make an honest report about the suspects escaped in an unknown direction, Hemoth said. Your chance is to get there in those 15 minutes. That's all I can do. Keep in mind, if the cops catch you there, you'll be the one who failed to escape. As you realize, no one's going to question you. It'll be easier to present the body. And don't set the place on fire. Cops want a clean crime scene. You understand? Yes. Boalk tried frantically to straighten up his head, which was splitting with pain, fear, hope, and gloating. I understand. Thank you. You're welcome. Hemoth was silent for a moment, then said in a lower tone, This is your last chance, Bo. Don't blow it like you've blown everything else. The phone went silent. Boalk looked at the dark screen and slipped the cell phone back into his pocket. He wouldn't have time to get weapons. But even if he did, who was he going to fight? Raiders? Who could take out Lousy Tim's entire gang? A police SWAT team? He hadn't made it half a mile to Tim's headquarters when he heard the first explosions and the crackle of gunfire. It had been a long time since Boalk had seen such carnage. Blood was everywhere in the main hall, on the floor, the walls, the ceiling. Bodies lay interspersed with broken furniture, some hanging from windows, either trying to shoot back or to jump out and flee. Boalk knew that Tim kept the receipts in his private office's top drawer of his desk. There was a safe there too, but Tim hardly ever used it. One would have to be suicidal to try to steal from Lousy Tim. He headed cautiously through the chaos of the main hall, careful not to step directly on bodies and pools of blood. Not that he particularly cared. He just didn't want to leave such a colorful trail behind him. At the entrance to the office, a body in a tattered overalls lay across the threshold. Boalk paused for a moment to bend over. The recent big guy from the vault. Well, Gustav, you lived like crap and died like crap. Boalk carefully hooked the Gustav's overalls with one finger and peered into the inside pocket. The transparent globe was intact. The assault rifle burst that had penetrated the big guy's body and head had passed a bit to the right. Boalk exhaled a sigh of relief. It would be pretty unlucky if the whole office was splashed with holy water. Contrary to expectations, no special treatment was given to Tim. No creepy, macabre messages in the style of the drug cartels of the past. Lousy Tim was shot like all his other accomplices, a burst to the body and a bullet in the head. The bag with the containers, of course, was gone. Boalk wondered whose soul the late Gustav from the vault was trying to sell to Tim, and how could such an important soul get into such a miserable hole? Boalk leaned over Tim's corpse and pulled out a drawer. The receipts were there, a whole pile of them, carelessly dumped into a tin cigar box. Boalk wanted to take the entire box, but changed his mind. Sorry, fellows, he thought, picking his receipts from the pile. If I take it all, somebody will figure out what's going on, and he sure will start gutting everybody. Boalk pulled out the last receipt and shoved the box back into the desk. He was about to rush out when his eyes fell on Tim's corpse. Apparently, Lousy had tried to jump to his feet at the last moment, and as he was falling back into his chair, shot several times, his shirt caught on the backrest and pulled up almost to his chin. The burst went through Tim's hairless chest diagonally. 6 bullet holes, enough to cover his entire body in blood. But still Boalk could clearly see that there was nothing on Tim's chest. No cross, pentagram tattoo, mandala, or protective symbols signifying that he had entrusted his soul to one of the guardians, or at least signed a contract with a vault, even one as shabby as the one he'd tried unsuccessfully to deal with. It was extremely rare for that to happen. After the armistice in the last war, which had actually ended with human victory, though it was not officially called that for the sake of political correctness, preferring to speak of the Great Reconciliation, and the pact on the freedom of postmortem, daredevils willing to risk their souls became a scarce breed. Any reasonable person would have preferred to sign a contract with the Guardian, who guaranteed that after death, the soul of the signer would not go to the wrong hands. Like Boalk's, for example. Balk slowly growled. It was that damned pact that had stripped him of everything and turned him into nothing, a miserable junkie feasting on a scrap of ruined souls. For what? For the fact that he, unlike some, did not defect to the side of the victors, but was faithful to his oath to the end? And now someone has become the guardian, and he, Boalk, was rotting away on the streets. But Tim is a different matter. His soul is not protected by the inviolable protective bonds of the contract. Boalk didn't know why the dealer hadn't taken such a natural precaution. Could it be because, by a sneaky profession, he did not trust vaults? Balk did not know, nor did he want to know. He wanted something else, and now he would have it. Juno jumped into the driver's seat and started the engine of the skimmer. A second later, Mylan was also on the tattered synthetic leather with shreds of yellow foam sticking out of it. In a few moments, the skimmer was speeding down the dark, deserted street, scaring away the rats in the garbage. What the hell happened? Mylan grumbled, fiddling with his seatbelt. What's the rush? Juno turned abruptly at the intersection, barely missing the cab, and blew in a straight line so that Mylan was squeezed into the seat. My source in the city hall gave me a tip, Juno said. There's good loot in the Northwest 3rd District, but we gotta get there before the cops do, or they'll take it. Mylan perked up. A waste? That would be nice. We sold our last shipment to the Dark City Council last month. Wait a minute. He looked at Juno worriedly. Did you say Northwest 3rd? Are you crazy? The lousy is running it. If we go in there, we'll get a lot of trouble. No, we won't. Juno made another turn, almost hitting some drunk. Mylan, this is a 1 in a million opportunity. My source was taking a big risk by dropping this stuff on me. Anyway, you don't have to worry about Lousy. He's the loot. Some tough guys took him and his crew down a few minutes ago. I'll be damned, Mylan muttered in a daze. The Lousy finally got it. He suddenly realized the meaning of what Juno had just said. What do you mean, he's the loot? A live, unsigned stiff? Are you serious? Yeah. My source works at the registry. He's been through the database. Lousy doesn't have a contract. Do you realize how much Dark City will pay for his soul? It's not like pushing bits of waste to junkies, totally different league. But we've got to get there before the cops. Otherwise, the stuff goes to the feds. Mylan looked at his watch and rested his hands on the front panel of the skimmer. Go, he said shortly. They arrived 6 minutes later and jumped out of the skimmer. No police sirens had been heard yet, but the two soul-leggers had no doubt that the place would soon be buzzing with uniformed men. They were almost unperturbed by the horrible carnage they saw as soon as they crossed the threshold. The door to Lousy's office was ajar, and some movement was visible over the lifeless body lying across the threshold in the semi-dark room. Juno pulled out a large automatic pistol and unsecured it. Mylan, lugging a weighty equipment bag, stepped behind the blood-spattered pool table just in case. Shit, did someone beat us to it? Juno's voice was filled with rage and despair. No way, this loot will be ours. He stepped forward with determination. Hey you, whoever you are, drop everything and come out, he shouted, pointing his gun at the door. Keep it slow, and let me see your bloody hands the whole time. A short pause followed. No problem. The deep and creepy, inhuman voice replied. The door frame shattered, along with a large chunk of wall. A huge clawed foot stepped over the body lying in the doorway, and a monstrous silhouette emerged through the slowly settling dust. Mylan stared in horror at the three-eyed, horned head with the ghastly fanged maw, at the body lumped with huge muscles, at the paws with long, curved, and obviously needle-sharp claws, at the shadows of the leathery wings folded behind the figure's back. The pistol banged several times in succession, but the bullets only made tiny sparks on the monster's body and ricocheted away with a screech. The demon raised its right paw, and Mylan saw the human heart pierced with one of the claws. "You can't eat our souls!" Mylan shouted, tearing open his shirt collar to reveal a cross. "They are in the care of our Lord Jesus Christ. You can't get to them, you infernal scum." Juno threw his useless weapon to the floor, crossing himself frantically, and moved his lips, probably reading a prayer. The demon licked the heart from his claw with his long tongue, swallowed, and laughed. "I don't care about your pathetic souls. The Great Pact forbids their consumption, but you forgot something." He leaned over to the soul leggers. "It does not forbid me to kill you. You can deal with your lord after that." And Bwalk the Flame-Eyed, former commander of Lucifer's left reserve army, the last of the princes of hell who had not surrendered, who for the first time in 300 years of miserable existence had absorbed the juicy, luxurious black soul of the hardened sinner, Dunball, and restored his true form, leaped forward.